Prova. Mi si sente?
Sì, ti si sente.
Okay. Grazie a tutte e tutti. Thank you very much for being here. I will start in Italian with the institutional salutes to the audience and then I will switch to English. Grazie a tutte e tutti per essere qui. Mi chiamo Stefano, sono vice coordinatore della sede padovana di ADI, Associazione Dottorandi e Dottori di Ricerca in Italia. E vi ringrazio ancora per essere qui alla presentazione pubblica dell'indagine, dell'11ª indagine ADI nazionale sulle condizioni e sulla salute mentale del dottorato in Italia. Ho il piacere di presentare che è qui con noi Giuseppe Dell'Avvocato, che è responsabile dell'organizzazione nazionale dell'associazione, e Chiara Anzolini, che è la responsabile della comunicazione dell'associazione nazionale, che invito a raggiungermi. Ok. Abbiamo Giuseppe. Sì. No, è l'emozione. La responsabile della comunicazione sta comunicando, però, giustamente. E niente, se vuoi fare un breve saluto.
Sì. Allora, anzitutto grazie a tutti e a tutte per essere qui, perché non è assolutamente scontato avere una partecipazione del genere su questi eventi che poi semplicemente raccontano quelle che sono le condizioni che poi noi tutti e tutte viviamo ogni giorno sulla nostra pelle, che però vedere scritte qui in grafici spesso fa un effetto che magari dopo valuterete. Il lavoro dell'indagine è un lavoro molto, molto importante, che porta avanti il servizio studi. Ormai siamo arrivati all'11ª indagine, quindi sono almeno 11 anni che facciamo indagini come ADI, ogni volta su un aspetto diverso del precariato e, quello sulla salute mentale è sicuramente fondamentale, ma non semplicemente perché è un aspetto che ultimamente è balzato un po' alla cronaca, specialmente dopo il Covid, per i tragici effetti, ma perché è una condizione che è figlia non solo delle condizioni materiali che viviamo come precari e come precarie, ma anche delle condizioni a cui ci sottopone il sistema nel quale ci troviamo, perché tutto il sistema ipercompetitivo, l'isolamento che porta la condizione della vita accademica o della ricerca, nella quale in qualche maniera ci si mette, o meglio, veniamo messi l'uno contro l'altra per riuscire, con la promessa di un riconoscimento che un giorno forse avverrà, è quello che in qualche maniera crea poi quell'isolamento che non ci permette nemmeno di socializzare quella sofferenza e quelle condizioni che invece, almeno in un contesto di comunità, riescono in qualche maniera ad essere placate. Non che questa sia la soluzione o l'unica soluzione, ma sicuramente è una parte importante. Quindi ora vedremo, perché ce lo presenteranno Ale e Federico, quanto le condizioni materiali incidono pesantemente su quella che è la condizione sullo stato di salute dei dottorandi e delle dottorande. Ma un aspetto un invito che vi faccio è ed è quello in cui sicuramente ADI, specie dal punto di vista delle sedi locali, è un aspetto fondamentale, è quello di non isolarsi, è quello di fare comunità e di vedere nella persona che è accanto a noi un compagno e una compagna che è nelle nostre medesime condizioni e col quale unirsi nella lotta ad un sistema che tende ad isolarci e che ci vuole in competizione e che non ci vuole e che sicuramente non ci aiuta ad essere solidali l'uno con l'altra. Aspetto che invece è cruciale se davvero si vuole sopravvivere in questa situazione. Adi, sono 25 anni ormai che fa battaglie, che lotta dal punto di vista nazionale per un'idea di un'università, per ottenere un'università più giusta, un'università più equa, oltre a provare a migliorare le condizioni materiali di dottorandi e dottorande, come è già successo in passato con gli diversi aumenti delle borse, la possibilità di accedere alla DISCOL, le proroghe, tutto quello che ormai saprete già a memoria, ma soprattutto lotta per organizzare una categoria che ha bisogno di essere unita e non divisa, perché come diceva un vecchio slogan di Adi, più siamo e più contiamo. Quindi con questo vi lascio ad Ale alla presentazione dell'indagine e vi auguro una buona serata.
Okay, so we'll start now. The presentation will be in English, and I'm introducing Alessandro Agostini, which is part of the National Survey Board of ADI and curated the survey on the mental health. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, me and other people, Federico is here, but also Anna, Fabio, Valeria, because of course, also our volunteering activities part of this collective endeavor that we just heard about. So the survey, we perform this kind of surveys on a regular basis in order to have data, in order to analyze what is the situation and to bring to light sometimes the darkest sides of our early career colleagues. This year we focused on PhD students, but usually we alternate, so we perform this kind of surveys also on postdocs. Postdocs. Unfortunately, we don't have that much institutional data to compare our data with, because our category is quite recent in Padova, in Italy. PhD exists since what? 35 years. How much is 45 years? Sorry. But it's still something that is keep changing in the when it comes to regulamentations and so on. And it is still plagued by this that we are gonna see, this very half students, half worker that has an important impact on the working conditions, and this is reflected also, unfortunately, on the mental health of our colleagues. So just to start, this survey was performed on a national level. We got 7,000 replies, so we got a meaningful coverage on a national level. That was somehow even when considered north, center, south, or when considering gender, or when considering disciplines. So we consider it representative of the Italian situation. And particularly we, due to the focus of our survey, we employed some standardized scales in order to measure mental health. In particular, we used the DASS 21 scale in order to measure anxiety, stress, and depression. But also when it comes to the work environment, there are other standardized scales that we, items that we utilized in order to be able to compare ourselves to other scientific works or works done, for example, from the Italian Institute of Statistics. And so this is gonna come to the end, the analysis of the mental health results, because they need to be put in the context, broader context of the material conditions of the PhD students. And one very important one is the one related to the stipend and the salary, and its impact on the socioeconomic state of the PhD students. So, sorry. Even though luckily after a lot of work we got small increase in quite recent years, as you can see, pretty minimal. Unfortunately, recently there have been an inflection, everybody knows, an inflation, a strong inflation increase, particularly when it comes to the kind of items that are most impactful on the salary and on the expenses of early career researchers. And these resulted in, as we're gonna see, an increase in the economic stress of the PhD students, particularly when one considers that it is a category that is strongly focused in its location in big cities, or city with the big campus like Padova, in which the huge increase in the rent prices really skyrocketed in the past couple of years. I mean, I don't want to bother you with all the details, but you can go, regarding all the topics that we're gonna cover, you can go to to our website, and there is the full 100-page report of the survey, and we did a very in-depth analysis of the renting prices increase in the cities in which there are the bigger campuses, such as Padova, Bologna, and so on. This can be measured when it comes to our survey and what the PhD students reported to us. As you can see, for example, in here, we asked about the capability of the PhD students to budget, to put money, save money, thanks. That is a typical item that is used to measure the risk of poverty or the poverty status of people, workers. And as you can see, this is already worrying. So as you can see, the strong majority cannot save, thanks, more than 100 euro per month. And this is of course a matter of the how much of the salary goes out with normal living expenses. And this is also reflected in the incapability of deal with unexpected expenses that is usually used by Eurostat as a way to measure poverty. And as you can see, when one takes the Eurostat standard 800 euro amount to measure, we see that it's a very small number, only 1/4 of the PhD student that replied to our survey that report that they can actually handle this kind of unexpected expenses that can be of any kind, health, I don't know, a computer that is needed to work, etc. So there is a huge economic stress on PhD students. And so this is on the economic side. On the working side, we wanted to see how is the working environment. The first thing, the easiest to measure, is the amount of hours per week that the PhD students work, actually. And as you can see, the data are pretty worrying in the fact that half of them work more than 40 hours a week. PhD student is a kind of, the PhD is a, but I mean, work in academia in general is not very regulated when it comes to this kind of working conditions. And unfortunately, this tends to lead to exploit because of the because a lot of different pushes that go in the same direction, because there is the self push, because of course PhD students need to be very competitive, so they need to produce more than other early career researchers. And then there is the push of course from the employer, because there is not a clear stated amount of hours that is requested as a maximum from, for example, the university for its workers. And so, as you can see, we have even a 12% that report to have more than 50 hours per week of work. When one does the math of what does it mean when it comes to the salary per hour, it gets ugly, as you can see, because it gets a figure between 6 and 8 euro per hour. And this is so low salary, long hours. This is the obvious result. So we measured a lot of different items meant to analyze how well, how the work environment is perceived by the PhD students. They are complex, so if you want, you can find them in the full report. This is an easy one to understand. So we simply checked after the first year if they report an increased or decreased willing to stay in academia, and this is the result. So in almost all cases, there was decrease in the interest to stay in academia after they had at least 1 year to experiment it.
Fun fact, the number of people who said their ambition to stay in academia greatly increased was 0 out of 7,025.
So yeah, strong numbers. And so this is the this is all the background, and then we come to the mental health. As I said before, it was measured with a standardized scale. 3 items: anxiety, depression, and stress. This is the first one, anxiety. As you can see, more than 1/4 gave out replies to a series of questions that, when measured, resulted in a scoring that is considered to be severe when it comes to anxiety. And particularly, one has to consider that there are international studies done on PhD students, both in the States, in Europe, around the world, in Australia. And the average is 17%. So we are 50% higher in this item than similar colleagues around the world. This is even worse when it comes to depression, because on the depression scoring, we have that 1/3 is of the PhD students have this severe scoring when it comes to depression. One can compare it to PhD students again of comparable institutions, but also one can compare it simply to the general population in Italy. This is a big study that was done during the pandemic period, so pretty depressing time. And as you can see, it is thrice. So unfortunately, academia, but this is in line. So the fact that we are higher than the general population is a known fact. This is also why there is this recent high interest in the mental health in academia, because it is known that is a working environment that is bad for mental health. But unfortunately, Italy clearly has a series of conditions, a series of specificities that increase this detrimental effect on our health. And of course, but I mean, this is easily to imagine. One can look at the simultaneous presence of several of these 3 scoring in the severe or very severe range. And of course, there is a tendency to have more than one. And as you can see, at half of the sample, half of the 7,000 that replied are severe in at least one of these three items. So this is the these are the data on the whole sample. What happens when one start to look into it for subcategories? One very important, of course, to look into is gender. So when it comes to simply the salary, one can see salary one would expect that is fixed, is not exactly that because there is a minimum salary, but then it is possible to have scholarships of higher amount. And what this means due to the unbalance in the amount of female and male PhD students having a higher amount scholarship is that on average there is a higher amount of salary on for the male colleagues. Of course, these ended up to be a pretty sizable difference because it's 45 euro per month, and you have to remember that on average for a huge portion of PhD students, it is difficult to handle unexpected expenses of, I mean, a similar only 20 times this amount. So it is a sizable difference. And this, of course, and as one can imagine, this is reflected in the difference in the percentage that can save money, and the difference in the percentage that report that they can handle an unexpected expense. When it comes to the psyche, when it comes to the mental health, this is also a field, topic in which there is unfortunately a difference, sizable difference between male and women, and it is in the direction that unfortunately comes out with this kind of studies. So for female colleagues, there is a higher amount of colleagues that report that analyzing their replies, they can be considered that severe or very severe when it comes to anxiety, depression, particularly comorbidity. As you can see, it is almost double the amount that as the three item in the severe range. And this, I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that. One is, of course, the economic, but of course there are also probably they can be traced to the amount of additional stresses, additional difficulties that they have to handle in everyday work in our departments. So this is probably something that particularly male colleagues should think about. And yeah, something, particularly when you analyze instead the different years of PhD, so first, second, third, something interesting that came out from the data is what we call the second year crisis. So we already saw it in a previous slide, but it is a general trend. So in general, we see that work-related items, work-related scores, thanks, like for example this one that is a one prepared by the Italian anti-corruption agency, for example, that test supervision, so the relation with the boss, one can say. As you can see, drop the scoring after the first year. So clearly, after knowing better supervisors, a lot of colleagues decrease their their scoring when asked the questions about how they work with them, etc. And this is a trend that we find all around our data, particularly also in the psychological situation, in the mental health. So again, this goes in the direction that unfortunately PhD is not good for your mental health. And on this, Federico is gonna go back because Padova has something to say about that. And with that.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to tell you a bit about more about the situation in Padova, because Padova was one of the universities that had, actually it was the university with the most responses, with more than 500. And so we can analyze the data, not just Padova against Italy, but also subcategories of PhD students in Padova. And some interesting things came out, some differences with the national situation. So first, we can look at the working hours, which again are generally bad across the board. In Padova, we can see that in engineering, in the engineering field, the situation is a bit better than at the national level, while in the humanities, it's actually worse than the national level, worse than in the STEM fields, let's say, aside from the life sciences and particularly medicine-related PhD courses. And you can see that in Padova, in the life sciences, there's more than 40% who work over 45 hours a week. And just as a reminder, in Europe for employees, which PhD students are not because they are half students, half employees, but not actual employees, but it's illegal to work more than 48 hours per week, even in a single week, even with overtime. So this is what they do basically every week. And when we presented this at the earlier this month at a meeting with all the PhD course coordinator, one of the coordinators from the medicine field said that well-being and mental health is not measured in working hours, and they should have passion for their work. So we can kind of explain where this comes from. So but that was not psychology. So also, if we look at the evaluation of supervisors that Alessandro presented earlier for the first, second year gap, we can see that the other three areas are more or less the same, and there is a significant drop if we look at the life sciences. And again, this is generally correlated between, we found that there was a high correlation between the objective measures of the working environment, like for example, working hours, and the subjective measures like evaluation of the supervisor or evaluation of the work environment and so on, as I mean, you would generally expect. We can also confirm that Padova has a second year crisis, so it's not an exception. And the results are even starker than the national average. So if you look at how much it drops from the first to the second year, it's even more than in Italy overall. So we can say that probably there's something that we need to fix in the working environment in the PhD, specifically in Padova. And also, of course, as partly as a result, we note that the situation is generally similar to the national level in terms of depression, but there is a higher gap between, again, scientific areas. So the situation is slightly better than the national level if we talk about engineering or generally STEM aside from medicine and biology, where actually it is worse. And it ends up being the worst in the humanities, which of course are characterized by other problems. Like, for example, we found that the humanities have much smaller research groups and often much fewer interactions with the PhD supervisor. There was a higher percentage, and we have a slide later, of people in the humanities that had no interaction with their supervisor or even no interaction with anybody at all in their work. And we can see how this can lead to there was a statistical correlation even with these psychological, let's say, risk factors, because the DAS-21 doesn't give, of course, a diagnosis, but it is generally used on the population level to say that if a person has a severe score, they have a higher risk of developing depression, anxiety, or stress disorders. And if we look at stress, which we didn't see as a distribution before, but there's a huge gap between the areas. And again, we have the life sciences and humanities that have a much higher percentage of people with severe scores than the national average. So again, this is on a whole. So there are a lot of different courses, particularly in the humanities in Padova. And we couldn't look at every individual course because, of course, the sample was not big enough. But this should be a wake-up call, essentially, to see where this is happening and why this is happening and how we can fix it, essentially. So just to wrap it up, in general, the psychological situation of PhD students is particularly severe, even when we compare it to PhD students abroad. And the studies that we cited, the ones that there's more that we cited in the report, are usually done with a similar method. So an online questionnaire that was sent to as many PhD students as possible, so to have large numbers and a representative sample. And we found that there is a strong correlation between exploitation, like the number of working hours, and then mental health symptoms. And this reflects in the second-year crisis. So the exploitation and bad working environment can actually lead to psychological symptoms. And of course, there's a lot of data, and we did many analyses. Ale mentioned gender and the first, second-year gap, but we also looked at other factors like, again, which discipline people are working in. There's also a north-south divide, as in with most things in Italy. So in general, the situation is alarming, and I don't think anyone can raise their flag and say we're better than others. But there are some things, some intersectional factors that should be taken into account. And of course, just to close it up and go back to the beginning, the salary problem is still central when we talk about PhD students. This was a result that was also confirmed by other studies. There was a Belgian study in, I think, 2017 that was performed to study something else, the relationship between supervisor and PhD student. And they actually found out that the salary was one of the most important factors, which was something that they had just added as an extra control. In Padova, if we want to talk about here, the second-year crisis ends up being more significant, both on a work environment level and on a psychological level. So there is a problem in general, and in particular in the humanities and in the life sciences, the results are worse than on average. So there are specific problems of our university. One thing that we can say that is positive, of course, just to avoid being all negative all the time, is that in our data, we found that the gender gap, both in terms of salary and in terms of working environment and mental health, seems to be generally smaller than at the national level. So this is something that we can build on, and we are already doing not well, maybe, but better than average. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm Biagio. I'm the PhD representative in Academic Senate here at UniPD, and I want to briefly talk about the request now we want to do to the university to help with the situation that, as you see, is really critical. We already started bring this request to especially the Council of the PhD course coordinators, and now we are trying to move on and to go forward. First of all, we know that we have a psychologist assistant service in Padova, but for the moment is very hard to access with. It is not able to do all the requests that arrives, and so first of all we asked for an improvement of that. But that is instrument that must be used for people that need it, besides the working place. We cannot create the problem and then after a solution to that. So we have to think before, and we think that one of the best solutions could be to introduce an external figure, to expert figure that can manage and check the overall situation of the PhD students, and then act accordingly with the university to solve this problem, to create solution. This is a thing that in some foreign countries exists, but we know that it could be difficult for our university to think on a figure like that in short time. So we think that another things that the university can do is to introduce annual meeting in which reference people, a professor from different department can interview the PhD student of a course with the presence of PhD representatives. In this way, we can have a monitor of the situation, because a lot of time is not only hard to find solution, but it's even hard to find where the problems are, because this situation a lot of time create isolationism of the people that undergo to this kind of situation. So it's even hard to know that this is happening. Then I think that in a lot of situation we saw that when there are problems with supervisor, the co-supervisor helps sometimes managing the things, and so we are stressing out this point and asking for a more quick assignment of the co-supervisor. And then last but not least, the clear point is to ask for an increase of the PhD salary, and we know that this could be a relatively high cost for university, but the situation is this, and we are talking about internationalization to be attractive from foreign countries, and we cannot think to do that without even give a little bit of increase on the PhD salary. So let's start with some question, if you have.
Okay, we know that there were some prepared questions from the thing, but we can maybe have one from the audience and one prepared, just to have some more interaction. To the public. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has something to ask or to say. You can also propose something if you have an idea or an experience to share.
Questions from home. So someone asked, okay, there were a lot of questions about the psychological welfare from the university, and we think we already answered to these questions, because there is the psychological bureau here in Padova. It's overworked, so and that's the way it is. So what we can recommend is, if you need help, ask for help. That's the basis. And interact with people and get feedback from each other, because maybe sometimes you see yourself worse than you actually are. And unluckily, the resources now are so insufficient that to get some help, you have to ask from outside. So that's one fast solution that, of course, who can afford should think about taking these steps. But of course, it's not. It's just a quick measure, but it's not a solution. Then there was, I think, an interesting question about how to manage the relationship between. Well, someone asked the ghost tutor. Because apparently they were experiencing a relationship with a supervisor that the supervisor was pretty much absent, at least, so to say. So so what's they ask how to defend yourself from the ghost tutor. What's the role of the co-tutor and the external expert that we mentioned before? So yeah.
Maybe I can say something on the data that we got, and then, on the political side, then maybe Stefano can answer better. But basically, we looked at who PhD students have collaborations with, defined as like meet and talk to about their research at least once a month, which is not a big hurdle. But 25% did not have interactions with both their supervisor and other figures like postdocs, other PhD students, or external, like company tutors, for example. The other types of collaboration were what we call the pyramid. So where people have interactions with postdocs, but not with their supervisor. What we call an individual relationship, so just with their supervisors, but with nobody else. And then only among equals, so only with other PhD students, but nobody who got a PhD. And then there's a not so small percentage of people who did not have any collaboration at all. And as we can see, like we put the DES21 distribution here, and basically any type of collaboration aside from the extended one, so from having a wider network of both their supervisor and other PhD students, for example, leads to worse outcomes in terms of mental health. And particularly having no relationship at all with either their supervisor, postdocs, or PhD students is the worst. And it is more common in the humanities where research groups are smaller or research is organized on an individual basis. And yeah, just yes.
Just comment about that. So there is a clear correlation between the number of collaborations that you have and your mental state, right?
Yes.
Are we sure that the one implies the second, or might it be a personal collaboration? So I had some students that didn't like to collaborate at all with others, right? But you know me, right? I'm very open to collaboration, but if someone doesn't want to collaborate because he or she doesn't like to do that, I don't usually force to do anything. I can suggest, but I don't force. So are we sure that these people don't prefer to work alone, and maybe they are prepared to have some mental stress because of that? Or is it a matter of the supervision?
Of course, we cannot know this, but we know that the people who had let's say, atypical cooperation, like collaboration networks, gave much worse evaluations to their supervisors. And again, you can say that if they have mental health issues, then maybe they give also they have a worse outlook on life and give worse evaluations to their supervisors, for example. But this is the correlation. Of course, we cannot infer causality straight away just from the questionnaire. The thing is that all the arrows tend to point in the same direction. So if they are left alone, let's say, they evaluate their supervisor as much worse. And they also have mental health issues. Of course, this might be, again, because they're depressed. But I think we should also act as if this was the problem.
Not question itself. I was just wondering whether you can discriminate. It's comparing students that have the same supervisor and checking whether there is consistency in their evaluation.
Of course, we didn't know who their supervisor was. So we're also trying to preserve people's privacy as much as possible, of course, because especially in some extreme cases, they might be afraid of repercussions, for example. Wait, maybe.
It's okay, you can hear me.
I don't know if the people online can hear. So
Thanks. Okay, but I think that's the finding whether there is this causality is not the point here. That's not what we need. What we see here is that there is a say, correlation, so that joint happening of three aspects that we probably see. I mean, in the view of how the research work is, they are all negative. Being stressed, being alone, and have a bad opinion of who you work with, it doesn't make for good research work anyway. So it's something that, irrespective of what is the reason for that, we should clearly calls for an action anyway. I think.
yeah, in general, also we like in this survey, we try to look at what are the, let's say, normal problems. So like overwork and maybe like a not so good relationship with supervisors and money issues and so on. We did not ask so much also for the privacy issues that I mentioned about extreme scenarios like sexual harassment, discrimination on the workplace. At the national level, we have an email address where we try to help people out and give concrete help as much as we can in those cases. But this is, let's say, hidden in the data, but in general, this type of study was more on the, let's say, again, on the normal problems.
I'd like to add something, like, because also here in Padova, like our association, luckily it's not so often, but it doesn't mean that the situation is less worrisome. We receive some emails from people that are experiencing some serious difficulties with their PhD, and many times the relationship with the supervisor is also involved, and we have a lot of sediments of experience, so we can we know how to move, we know how to address situations. Of course, the situation it belongs to the person, so we don't do anything without the consent of the person. We just direct according to what we think is better their effort. The thing is that 99% of the times, with more dialogue, much earlier, the situation would have not escalated. So what it's important, and I think it's valid in regardless of the department or whatever, is that to be careful about what's going on. And if you're seeing like something is not quite right, and you can think, but it's nothing, I will go on. Yeah, my supervisor is absent, but yeah, I have the deadline in 6 months, so well, there's no problem. But then you get after 6 months and you didn't have any interaction with the supervisor. The supervisor has their own personality, and is a person, as we all are, and may be not able to understand you and your situation and your decisions, and then problems arise. So it's very sad when someone gets to ask for help from us when there is no more space. Like, you get, in the worst case, we also had you get a rectoral decree that excludes you from the PhD. Then you have only one choice: take a lawyer and go to the tribunals and get and do that. But if you came months before, you would have much more opportunities to fix the situation. So to everyone that's listening, problems happen, and it's okay. They happen. If you address them as early as possible, then you have the least amount of stress, least amount of negative outcomes possible, and it's easier for you to get help and for us to help you.
Or if you see this kind of pattern to start to take place, I don't know what we suggest when we say it, but maybe you can be ambassador of that, is what Stefano just said. So not just if it's happening to you, but also to people in your, I don't know, department or course or whatever.
This is also why it's we stressed so much. Biagio stressed so much in the proposals that we sent and we exposed to the PhD course coordinator the importance of having someone outside the PhD course, because sometimes the problem is in the relationship between the PhD student and the supervisor. But like as some of the data show, sometimes there's entire PhD courses where the working environment has some issues, like working too much. If everyone or a lot of people in one course are working 50-hour weeks, then that is not a problem between an individual PhD student and their supervisor, and it cannot be solved inside of the PhD course. It has to have like someone external come in and act.
Yeah, we also want to, our proposal also takes, for the time being, an external professor from another doctoral course and a student representative in a way that if I am, I don't know, an engineering PhD student and I'm complaining that I'm overworking, but I have a full professor from medicine that, oh, you're only working 48 hours per week. Oh, poor boy. Our PhD candidates work 50 hours and they don't complain, you know? So that's also, it's a quite delicate matter. So we also want for a representative from the a PhD student representative in a way that can, you know, you can have another voice. So there's less room for possible biases.
Yeah, just to point out another aspect that maybe can be considered next here. I think that with that maybe a lot of PhD students see that their work is not evaluated enough from university, from supervisors. And this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, for the problems with the supervisors. Like, okay, I work more than 40 hours per week. And what happened with my supervisor is that he doesn't recognize my work, and so does the university. For what I see, many of the publications, maybe the most of them are made from PhD students, and then the names of the professors come with the name of the PhD students. So this is a kind of weird mechanism where in which the works of the PhD is degraded, since they are not the main authors of their works. So maybe next time this aspect can be seen, and this may be used as a leverage for gain more power to the PhD asks. I don't know if you already thought about that.
So the questionnaire, the ANAC questionnaire for evaluating supervisors had some items that were like he values or he or she values my work and makes me feel like I'm doing something significant and recognizes my accomplishments. And what we found, we didn't show this data separately, because what we found was that pretty much all of the questions about supervisors correlated very, very well with each other. So there's basically, if someone is unhappy with their supervisor, often they have like a lot of problems. As for like the names in the papers, I would distinguish between like having like other names in the papers, which I would say is normal if the PhD student's work is recognized, for example, in the fields where it's relevant, putting them as first author, which is a question of like, let's say, good practice. And the other extreme example, which is leaving PhD students out of the publication, which is unethical, and it should be, again, there should be someone that checks, and if this happens, the supervisor should face consequences, because of course it's unethical to leave people who worked out of a publication.
The work from which the publication comes from the PhD. Okay, so maybe university does not have this point clear. Okay.
No, yeah, it's something that when it comes to creating a form like this that has to go out, this is a point that from a technical point of view is difficult to test because it's very subject dependent how it works. So there are places in which it's alphabetic, etc., etc. So that just from a technical point of view. Beside that, yes, but I'm not sure that this kind of form is the place. Is more probably something that can be done on a base of like I don't know, like we have on a national level the mobbing sportello. What is the word for help desk? Thanks. Something on this line, I think is more. I mean, I feel, but maybe I'm wrong, that is more something like this, that is something very severe, that instead of just testing it, is better to like collect the cases because they are worth investigation. It's not just, I mean, of course, can be used from a statistical point of view, but I think that this kind of situation, they need to be addressed like on a one-on-one case. So this is something interesting as a suggestion for the local branch, but also for the national level.
There's also like a fine line kind of between like recognizing PhD students' work and, for example, saying PhD students were in, I don't know, 90% of papers, I'm just drawing a random number here, had a PhD student as first or second author. And saying like PhD students should be evaluated on the number of papers that they produce, which is also problematic for other reasons because of the, like, again, overwork, which already comes from a lot of sources, like the competitive pressure. So increasing that competitive pressure is a risk. What we usually try to do also at the national level is to recognize that PhD students, and I would say, in general, precarious early career researchers do a lot of work and are a key part of the university. Like the research system is also built on us, but at the same time trying to avoid the usual like slogans as like excellence and producing more and more, which again leads to more exploitation.
Yes, I'll check online. If there's someone here that has anything to ask, just tell us. Yeah, see.
No, so for maybe to continue on this topic of the authorship, I think one good idea could be to, if there are some guidelines for authorship, which there might be, maybe to give them to the PhD students when they start, so at least people will know, and then maybe they can ask or fight, or they will be informed. That could be, I think, useful. And then maybe, I think in Italy here we have, at least in some, just to maybe change the topic, we have stress on the problem. I've seen an issue which is very curious, I think, because of the pyramidal scheme. We have the professor ordinario, and so maybe sometimes, at least in the scientific fields, you have this professor ordinario that must be last with the asterisk, and then you have the associate professor that cannot be last, so it puts it first, and the PhD student, who's the actual person that is doing the job, ends up in the middle, because you have all this pyramid that is kicking people out. So even bigger issue because of this, I think, which I have no idea how to solve.
Yeah, so before wrapping it up, okay, thank you again, everyone, for coming, even you from home. I would just like to close this moment of this presentation and this confrontation, this sharing moment with I would like everyone who can to subscribe to ADI. It's to get a membership card. It costs 12 euros. But it will be we will support someone who supports you. And regardless of your background, your situation, whatever, it's as we said before, the more we are, the more we count. And you can do it from people that are online. You can do it online. People who are here, we have all the paperwork and the cards for you. You get the membership card. You're not requested to do anything for anyone. If you want, you're more than welcome. We always need some help. The more we are, the more we can do for people. And yeah, it's one coffee per month. So think about it. Also, there is, if you want to be of help on Padova, you can meet us on our weekly meeting. They're open for everyone, and you can just come anytime you want. But there are also like national task forces, like the survey task force, and contrast to mobbing and corruption, environment task force for the PhD for people with disabilities. So if there's something that you feel like you would like to help or to know more about, please the website is dottorato.it, dottorato.it, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.